Welcome to Job Sharing and Beyond, the Future of Work podcast that goes beyond the traditional 9 to 5. I am Karen Tischler, speaker, consultant, and host of the show, where we hear from global experts every other week to discover innovative solutions and tips on how to remain a relevant employer in the future. I am super excited to have Dan Reed on my show today. In his day job, Dan works in financial services. He started Career Dad in the summer of 2019. In our conversation, he will share more why he started it and what his mission is. We will also talk about how parent networks at companies can be extended and talk about flexible working and portfolio careers. We go on to talk about skills learned as parents and how COVID has really eliminated the secret parenting. Thank you so much, Dan, for coming onto my show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
We have a lot of people from all over the world listening to us today, so they might not know where every guest is situated from. So could you give us a little bit of a background where you're calling in from?
Absolutely. So I'm in the UK. I'm in Northampton, which is just north of London. It's in the evening. It's a little bit rainy, and looking forward to when the sun comes back.
Here it's like, here is actually some sun already. And it is midday. Do you have any type of food that you particularly like that's from your area of the world?
I don't think British cuisine is known for being fabulous. My guilty pleasure is actually your neck of the woods is Tim Hortons.
Oh.
So I am infatuated with the fact that I can go to Tim Hortons with $5, get a coffee, orange juice, and a breakfast bagel, and leave with change. I guess you can't beat fish and chips though, right?
Yeah,
British fish and chips.
I lived in England for 9 years, and yes,
okay,
I really like this, and I actually liked the cooked breakfast. I really did. Yes.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, my wife's parents lived in Germany for a long time.
Oh, okay.
So I'm very familiar with a very rural town in Lower Saxony. But yeah, some German cuisine is just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. Well, so before we get really started, I think maybe people will be surprised to find out how we actually met. Do you want to tell people?
Yeah, I think especially given what we're here to talk about and what we do.
Exactly.
So we met on a Facebook group through the Gary V First in Line Facebook group. So we're both big fans of Gary V and what he talks about. I guess that it both attracted us to the Facebook group, where it's a community of like-minded people that are, I guess there's a lot of the group that want to try and start businesses, or they have questions and they want help answering them. And what drove me there is just someone who is pretty happy and content with what I have in my life, and I'm content in the aspirations that I have, that I'm on the path to get them. So I just want to try and help give that back to others. And I think that, we just started commenting in the same kind of threads. And then it was like, oh, you talk about kind of parents and work. And that's actually my side business is talking about parents and work. So maybe it's worth us having a chat. And that was that around Christmas? Before, it feels like a while ago now.
It feels, with this world now, it feels,
pre-COVID,
exactly,
right? So a lifetime ago.
it really did. And I was fascinated about Gary V, like his approach, and I actually ended up on Ask Gary V when he had Beth Comstock on his show, and I asked them about professionals trying to return back to the paid workforce and how one could actually try to promote this with organizations that might not be quite as flexible about parental leave. And so that's how really I got all started. And then we met. And so, yes, now could you, because I obviously did a lot of research. So could you tell our listeners how you started Career Dad?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, so I have my day job, which I work in financial services. I head up digital and platform delivery for a bank. So looking after websites and marketing automation and dabbling in marketing technology and things like that. But I also have a wife and two children. And in my, I don't know, it must have been my mid-20s was around the time where I was getting married, and felt I've always wanted a family for the longest of times, but I've always, I guess in the back of my mind, been very ambitious, although that was probably masked throughout my late teens, early 20s by low self-confidence, and then thankfully kind of resolving that, which is another story. I got to the point where I knew that I wanted to be incredibly successful, quote unquote, but I was already worried about what that would mean from a family life perspective, because I grew up in a divorced household, and it wasn't the best. So I knew family was important and I wanted family, but I also knew that I wanted to be as present as I could be. And so there was this constant battle between, well, how can I be as present as I can be, but also make choices that are going to mean I'm not going to be as present as I can be. When my second child was born, which was the summer of last year, 2019, I think that's where, and that's also the time that I started Career Dad. I think that's where it really got to a head, because I felt torn between wanting to progress my career and wanting to have family. And when I spoke to people about it, what I got back was, well, get your priorities straight. And this was actually, whilst on paternity leave. I was on paternity leave, but I wanted to know what was going on with work. And so I was messaging kind of people at work and saying, oh, how did your presentation go? Oh, did you, go for that promotion? Just talk to me about work. And I was just met with I'd say resistance. It was very much, get your priorities straight. You need to focus on your family. Work will still be here in 3 weeks. Don't worry about it. And it was coming from a good place, but it wasn't understanding me. And I was trying to say, look, my family are incredibly important, but so is my work. And I'm able to consume two different pieces of information, and so I wondered, am I alone? Because when I started to talk about it, it was very much hearing back, well, this is how you need to find better work-life balance. And I'm thinking, that's not what I'm after. I'm after someone who gets that I might want to work in Europe for 3 weeks out of the month, but I also want to pick up the kids from school. Like, I know that might sound incredibly selfish, but that's what I wanted. So a long story short is I put a video out on LinkedIn. I've been very active on LinkedIn for a number of years, and just said, look, these two words are floating around in my head, career and dad. If I say Career Dad, does it mean anything to anyone? And I was just inundated with dads saying, yes, you don't need to explain more. I understand what you're saying. We can talk about guilt, we can talk about anxieties, we can talk around mentorship and career development and, being stressed and all of this stuff all in one package. And so I never actually intended to set it up as a business. I thought, oh, I'm really passionate about this. So I dabble in websites. I'll create a website. And then very quickly that led on to a podcast, the Career Dad Show. And then I got advice to set it up as a business. And now we're 7 or 8 months in or so. And yeah, it is a business that I run alongside my day job.
Wow. That's just amazing to hear how, one idea and sharing it with the community really was how everything started. And now your mission of Career Dad, to positively impact as many dads' lives as possible. Could you share sort of like, more to that?
Yes, absolutely. And that's it's a very good question, because it's a very purposeful statement. And I don't mean kind of in the grandeur, oh, isn't this a really have a lot of purpose? I mean purposeful in terms of to help as many dads' lives as possible. Because, as you all know as well, and from being a Gary Vee fan, I find numbers quite arbitrary. I think that I could say I want to impact 10,000 dads' lives. And that's great, because you're starting from pretty much zero, or maybe 10 or so. 10,000, real aspirational. But what happens in 12 months' time where it's 9,500, and then in 13 months' time where it's 10,001? Do I A, stop, or B, say, well, now it's 20,000? Like, it doesn't matter. Right. It's just an arbitrary number. So I wanted to pick as many as possible, because it's never ending. That I can never achieve that goal, but I can constantly be on the journey to achieve that goal. And the reason, again, that I went to positively impact as many as possible is because, as I say, having a day job, having a family, and starting a business is quite time consuming. I therefore have to be really, really precious about my time. So every opportunity that I get, or every, I'll do talks to companies, and they'll be paid talks, and I'll also do some talks to charities and schools that will be free. And I've got to weigh up what the right thing to do is. And so I've the whiteboard that you can see behind me in the top corner, just up there, is the mission statement of positively impacting as many dads' lives as possible, because every single opportunity I cross-reference with that. Is that going to help me get one step closer towards that goal? If yes, I'll find some way of doing it. If no, I might have to put it on the back burner.
I think that's a really good approach, because in my own experience, time is definitely the most valuable thing.
Absolutely.
So now, as you are approaching and becoming more well-known, and there are more and more people aware about your network, I had a chance, for example, as I'm German, to go to Germany in January to attend the Father Summit, which is basically a conference focused on balancing work as well as being a dad. And so there was the Federal Minister of Family there, as well as company leaders. For example, Kava Yunosi, who is the head of HR in SAP Germany. And to me, SAP is a best practice company, because they have so many initiatives towards life-work balance, as well as a fathers network. So does that exist in the UK? And like, are you aware of a lot of companies that have networks, father networks like that?
Yeah, so to answer the first point, does something at a UK-wide level that is a father's way? I'm going to say no, or if it does, I'm not aware of it. Therefore, it's not doing a great job. If it does, there's nothing that I'm aware of that exists like that. It's not a company based. That is where I guess people like me and Ian Dinwiddie and Hanson Lee and these guys are kind of occupying that space. From a company perspective, again, I think there's a handful of companies that are looking at dad or father networks. They are very, very much in the minority. I think that largely it's packaged up into a working families network or a parental network. And then there are still a lot of companies actually without that. You tend to, I guess there's kind of I think of it as probably like 4 levels, where you've got nothing. You then potentially got a working mums network. And then the next level down would be a working families, working parents network, and then a working dads network. But the latter is very, very few and far between.
Yeah. I have to say, here in Canada, I am also not aware on a Canada-wide basis, nor really that, any particular company sort of, jumps up in my mind and say, okay, this is one that is running a father's network. So
I was talking to a global company a few months back, and they were which is great because that's part of the Career Dad offering, I guess. And they were saying, look, we have diversity and inclusion networks. We have a family network, and we're really struggling to engage dads. What can we do to engage dads? And I said, so tell me about your family network. Oh, well, it's a parenting network. I said, well, that's kind of the problem, is that, and actually the other way is that dads and mums generally don't consider themselves as parents, as in they identify as a mum or as a dad, not as a parent. So then the default is when you see a parenting network is, oh, well, that's for mums, because historically that's what it's been geared for.
Exactly.
Now, I'm not saying, I'm very conscious when I talk about anything to do with equality or diversity and inclusion, that actually what we're after is that level playing field. And oftentimes what happens is people have to jump on the ends of the seesaw to go, this bit's really important, and then this bit gets left behind. So then they jump on this bit, so it's really important, and this bit. And so that's really, really difficult. So I'm not saying you need to have a separate working mums network and a separate working dads network, but again, the company I was speaking to, the advice I was giving is, if you have a working families network or a working parents network, have that sitting across the top, but then have a subgroup, which is a working dads or the dads network, and have it and have your working network that sits across the top. Have a co-chair that is a mum and a dad, and you can have group activities and then siloed activities as well, because within the organization that I work in for my day job, I've held and kind of started dad-only coffee drop-in sessions, and there's been such a change in conversation when it is dad-only versus mixed, and I think it's really, really crucial to be able to provide a space to have those conversations.
I think that is a really good idea, because I imagine that sometimes people will be more honest if they are, in a situation where they feel somebody might feel identical to them, and then can reveal how they struggle with the multiple aspects of being a parent and working.
Yeah. I think it's really important. And even with the Career Dad Facebook group, so there's a Career Dad LinkedIn group, and that's open to anyone can join. It's pretty quiet because this is the problem we need to overcome, right? The nature of people being identified by the organization they work at, they want to keep quiet and not talk about any struggles. So it's normally just me talking about all the struggles that I have. But the Facebook group is again dad only, and I struggle with that from time to time, because I want to have an inclusive environment. But then I poll the dads in the group every kind of few months and say, this, as you're aware, this is a dad only space. Is that okay? Do you want that? And unanimously it is yes, because they will talk about things very guard down, where they don't have to worry about how their partner or their wife or girlfriend or whoever is going to perceive them. Now, we can argue whether that's right or wrong, but it is what it is. So why not create that space to allow someone to be vulnerable and to get advice? Because what's the alternative? Hitting a diversity quota by making the group open to all and not having the conversation, and then not fulfilling that statement.
Right.
So yeah, it's tricky.
Well, I agree. I feel, what you described of having multiple groups, and then under a umbrella of, an inclusive parenting network, I think that sounds like a great idea. And as we are talking about this now, obviously with COVID and people working from home and having to deal with unpaid care work, it's like as I'm, a big proponent of flexible work to ultimately create a more diverse workforce by allowing especially professionals returning back to the paid workforce after a long period of time, to me, it has brought that whole care work out into the open from being previously much more visible. And I imagine that's one big aspect, like, before, I've forgotten how long ago it was, like, the BBC reporter in, I think it was in South Korea, where his little daughter came in, and it was the talk of the week, if not months. And now pretty much every Zoom call,
every day,
exactly, somebody has a kid or a cat or somebody coming in, right? So how do you deal, like, with the care work, as well as and also in your conversations with other dads?
It's incredibly tough, because so my personal situation, as I've got a 5-year-old son and a near 11-month-old daughter. So my wife is on maternity leave at the moment. She's on the unpaid bit of her maternity leave. And so she will be returning to work. I think her maternity leave ends in about a month, but then she accrues all this holiday. So it's actually an extra 2 months on the end.
Right.
But that's incredibly tough, because it's, I'm working all day in this office. And I'm lucky enough to have a dedicated space to be able to do that. I'm not taking that for granted at all. But she's trying to manage 2 kids all day.
Right.
And, what I'm really worried about is this, and I see it happening, this creation or division in society of those who can afford, either financially or mentally or whatever it is, to have provisions in place, and those who cannot. And so we're quite fortunate in that my wife, when she does work, I say full time, she actually works part time. She works 3 days a week. We can manage that, and we can have help from grandparents, and but what happens if you're a single parent and you're being told return to work, but there's no childcare, and last week I did a LinkedIn Live, which was the forgotten parents of lockdown, because I think that there's so much advice around, how to manage your kids during lockdown, how to, and actually a lot of the advice seems to be aimed at the parents to just like not judge themselves and just, put on the movie, you almost need to relax. Whereas, well, what if you've got a baby or a toddler or a kid with special needs that you can't just leave?
Exactly.
Like how are you going to manage this? And I think it is going to create more divisions within society of those who have and those who have not, and it really, really worries me. I think particularly then focusing on the dad perspective side of it, it's really mixed. There are dads who cannot wait to have some sort of separation between life and family and work. There are those who I spoke to a guy a few days ago who says, I never want to go back to the way it was. I want to become a fully remote worker. This guy never worked from home before in his life. I want to become a fully remote worker. I'm getting so much more done. I'm spending so much more time with my family. Don't want to go back to the way it was. And then, personally, I find myself somewhere in the middle, that the reason I'm an advocate for flexible working is because of that really important word, flexible. One thing I'm really, really keen on putting out there as a message is what we are going through now is not flexible working. It is mandated working from home where possible. That is not flexible.
Yeah. And I agree. It's sort of interesting sometimes, the definition of flexible work. I see it as a much broader definition that maybe some other people would see, because I'm hoping that the awareness that care work is so big and takes up so much effort that ultimately will lead to more people being aware that maybe job sharing where you basically take one job and have a talent partnership between two people, might be a possibility, and not just quote unquote mothers, but that could be for somebody who is maybe planning to retire at some point and somebody new coming together, or maybe a dad who wants to create a side business with somebody else. So I feel in Canada that is currently, there is very little awareness. And so I was curious, when you talk to other dads, are you aware of any dads that maybe even doing it right now, sort of a part-time career, or because of all the lockdown are contemplating to do that going forward?
Yeah. So interestingly, not in the UK, there's a couple of dads I speak to who are stay-at-home dads, or one guy in particular, work from home dad.
Okay.
He has his own business. It's just from home. But I think the majority are still very traditional in the setup. And it's funny because I'm in that setup too. I out of our family household, I bring home kind of 80% of the income. I work 5 days a week. I sometimes do early mornings and late nights. And my wife works 3 days a week. But I'm out there talking about, diversity and stuff. But my main message is that actually it needs to work for those families and those individuals. Don't just do something to be part of a quota. It's about understanding what works for you. But interestingly, I was speaking to a guy again who's in California, and he was talking about when he worked at Microsoft. He also became a realtor as well, and he said that he got to the point where he'd reduced his hours with Microsoft to 3 days a week, kind of 4 hours a day, because he got to the point where he was building up this realtor business. And then he actually ended up leaving, and now he's doing that full time alongside a couple of other businesses as well. So I think that as portfolio careers, which I don't know how big of a thing that is over in Canada, but the notion that it's kind of the work equivalent of don't put all your eggs in one basket, that if you can have a job that maybe provides 80, 90 or even 100% of your income, but takes 70, 80% of your time to just invest the rest of your time into something else and diversify your income streams, really. And I think that portfolio careers, they've been around in the UK as a notion for a good 10 or 15 years, but they've often been aligned to the working mum, or it's kind of, it's the mum returning from maternity leave who's going to be a party planner and also going to do this. And it was kind of a bit of a joke. Now you're seeing people like, not to be by no means a poster child, but I have a portfolio career and I've got a very quote professional job, and there's no, and I had some of this feedback from colleagues and friends. Why are you starting your own business? You've got a good job. And it's not about having a good job or not. It's about fulfilling that passion and the need. And why would you not? So I think that it's going to become more. I think we're going to see more of it. And actually, with COVID, I think it's really opened up those opportunities. It's much easier to have a half-hour Zoom call with someone at 3:00 in the afternoon than it was a few months ago. So I think fast forward a year, we'll probably see much more of this.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that too. I think in the short term, from all I read, I think it might be very negatively turning out for particularly mothers because of the lack of support for care work. But in the long term, because it will, in my mind, make everything much more flexible, it will, I think, present much more opportunities, as you said, to have maybe job sharing or to have a part-time career, and people might be doing multiple jobs because it is more possible, maybe if there is reduced traveling back and forth to work, and it becomes much more common to do that. So I see a lot of opportunity going forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, if depending again, and I'm really conscious of this kind of societal divide in the haves and the have nots, but I, I've not got commuting costs. I'm not buying lunch and coffees every day.
Exactly.
I'm able to save a fair bit of money each month. And if I wasn't as career focused, I could think, well, actually, I could reduce to 3.5 days, 4 days, and have the same take home money as I did before COVID.
Yep.
And actually, what could I do with that time? And I don't know whether, that's, I've not really played that out in my head.
Yep.
It's not something that I personally want to do, but I would be shocked if there were people who weren't thinking along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then one other thing, because you had mentioned before that you've talked with dads that are stay-at-home dads. So one of the things I think, which is also, again, COVID is helping much more, is the skill sets one learns by, say, being a stay-at-home parent and then trying to apply to paid work afterwards. Have the people you have talked to who either are or were stay-at-home dads talked about whether it was difficult for them to return, or if people appreciated the skills they learned? Because I feel that's something really, and that has been undervalued so far.
Yeah. So the stay-at-home dads that I'm thinking of are stay-at-home dads that is what they're doing.
Okay.
They've not stayed at home for kind of 3 years and then gone back to work.
Okay.
Although having said that, there was one guy who I spoke to who was actually a stay-at-home dad for about 3 years, and then went back into teaching, actually. So retrained as a teacher and became a teacher. He felt like the experience that he had from being at home really helped with that.
Yeah.
I think though, it's a really interesting question because it goes back to the way that generally men and women feel and think about applying for jobs and the skill sets required for those jobs.
Exactly.
So I talk, I'm a real big fan of mentoring and particularly mentoring women. And one of the main things I end up talking about is when someone says to me, Dan, there's this job I'm really interested in. Can we go through the job spec? Because I don't know if I'm quite qualified for it. We go through the job spec and they might have 6 out of 10 of those skills. And I say, so what are you going to do? And they say, well, I don't have the skills. And I say, you've got 60% of the skills. And actually, these 2 things here, you don't have direct experience, but you've done this, which kind of aligns to it. So you've kind of got 80%. And the other 20%, isn't that your development opportunity? Isn't that why you're interested in the job, that it's actually a mutual 2-way thing?
Right.
And they're kind of mind blown. It's like, well, but why should I apply for the job when I don't have the skills? And it's like, well, you see that guy over there, he's going to, because research shows that on a whole, that men, when they have 9 out of 10, if they have 6 out of 10 of a skill set, they're happy to apply because that's enough. And so you end up in a position where on paper you have a man and a woman that have the exact same experience, but they're not even applying. The women aren't even applying for the job because they feel like they're underqualified.
Yeah.
And so I think, I had someone who went on maternity leave in my team. She kept in touch all throughout, and when she came back, before she went on maternity leave, she was super ambitious. Wants promotions. We kept in touch throughout. When she came back, I said, where's your head at? She said, nothing's changed. Still incredibly ambitious, but I want to do phased return. I want to use my holiday to do 3-day weeks for, I think it was about 4 months in the end. I don't want this to impact my progression ability. And my take on it was, you were a superstar performer before you went on maternity leave, so you haven't lost that, but now you've also gained the somewhat hellish experience of being a parent,
right? Especially with a newborn.
with a newborn, right? So you've not lost any skills, you've just added to it. And actually now I had a conversation with her about a month ago, because she was giving me the joyous news, even though it's all going to be hell for me, that she's got a promotion elsewhere in the business. Which is fantastic.
Right,
so she's leaving my team.
Yes.
But yeah, it's and that's great. So I think that it's just about having that belief. And what I try and do is try and talk to other managers to try and get rid of some of those prejudices.
I really appreciate that. I think that it is important. And COVID in itself is obviously a horrible thing for the world. But there are so many good things that are coming out of it at the same time, I feel, to really help society, move forward. And the notion of like secret parenting, I think is really falling by the wayside, because it just isn't possible, right?
Yeah. So. No, this is it. I had one dad, who this was probably about 2 months ago now, so still relatively new COVID. And he had a daughter that was just under 2 years old. His partner worked at a care home doing night shifts.
Wow.
So they didn't see each other very much. He worked in sales, in recruitment, and he was messaging me saying, I don't know what to do, because my employers are still pushing me to make all my call quotas, to bearing in mind who's speaking to recruiters in when the world locks down. He's also the primary caregiver to his daughter, and COVID. So he's like, what, how do I do that? And we talked about a number of things, but realizing that one of his biggest pressures was, well, I don't feel comfortable calling people because my daughter might cry, or my daughter might do what. And my take on it was, if you were calling me and you started the call, and bearing in mind this is probably a cold call,
right?
And you started the call by saying, just to let you know, I've got my daughter with me, so I have to apologize for any background noises. You're already built rapport with me.
Exactly.
So I've got 2 kids at home, right? I said, use it to your advantage. And he messaged me a few weeks later saying that he'd found it had worked wonders. But then actually he'd since been put on furlough. So he was having an even better time, because he didn't have to have that pressure of trying to look after his daughter. So I think that if COVID can, I was thinking, are people going to take such chunks of time off for school holidays in the future? Or are they going to go, do you know what? I'd rather take time off not in school holidays, or maybe I'll take 2 out of the 5 days off, and I'll work 3 out of the 5 days from home, because we spent all of lockdown doing it.
Right.
I don't know.
Exactly. I think it's like, it was an experiment that it would not have been possible on that scale if somebody had tried it, right, on a more voluntary basis, but as you're forced to it. So I think there will be a lot of, I think, positive lessons learned, especially for work, life, I guess balance. I know you don't like that term so much.
It's fine.
But so I honestly, Dan, I could talk with you forever. But is there anything that you feel we haven't talked about, from your dad's network, or anything that you would like to share with our listeners?
There is actually. I think so we've talked a lot about the dad side of career dad. I want to bring to your attention the career side of career dad, because this is something that I'm hearing quite a few dads talk about. Is they feel like their careers are on hold. They feel like that, but as I mentioned up front, the nature of career dad, it is that fulfillment by family and from work.
Right.
And they feel like work is stagnating, I've spoken to guys who were about to get in-role promotions that have been put on hold, guys who were about to move companies and that's all been put on hold. I've actually spoken to a couple of dads who are in probably the worst situation in that, where they'd handed in notices to go to other jobs, and then those jobs have put those on hold, and they're now out of work. And so I think, there's a lot of dads that I'm speaking to that are saying it feels like we're a bit in limbo. Do we just kind of write off the year?
Right.
And I get it, because I can kind of relate to that as well. I think what I would say and what I have said is, if anyone of your listeners is feeling like that, I think that this is the time to really double down on building for that future. So before we started recording, we were talking about, the power of networking and how even we've met. And the fact that it's taken us 6 or 7 months to actually speak for the first time, that's not a shock, really. And I think that people who get to the point where they say, do you know what, I don't want to be in my job anymore, I'm now going to network really hard for 2 weeks and find another job, it just doesn't work like that. So what I'm saying and what I'm recommending is to start building, if you're not already, build those authentic relationships now, because they take months or years. And so that when companies do start to lift their lockdowns, you're going to be in a much better position than if you hadn't have done that. And some of the pushback I get is, well, won't that take a long time? Yes, it will. But what else? I'm not saying that do that instead of something else. I'm saying do it as well as whatever it is you're doing, and your future self will thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And now, no, but I fully agree with you. I really do. And now, how can people find you? Where can they find you?
So in a little village in Northampton, aside from that, digitally. Career Dad is a good start. So careerdad.co.uk. From there's all the links to all the social channels and stuff. Or if you're on LinkedIn, if you just type in Dan Reed Career Dad, again, I'll come up. Or just I'm very, very open to trying to help people as much as I can. I'm very happy for people to just drop me an email if they just want a sounding board for something or just want to chat. Again, dan@careerdad.co.uk.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And it was so nice to quote unquote see you. and
it's been great.
And I hope to, have a similar conversation maybe in a year from now, and to see how the world has changed since then.
That'd be fantastic. It's been so fun talking to you. I'm really, really pleased that you've invited me on. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We hope you gained valuable insights and new ideas. To keep listening to future episodes, please head over to iTunes or your favorite player and subscribe and give it a rating. We would very much appreciate a review and for you to share it on social media, so more people can start innovating in how they offer employment. Until the next time, goodbye!